Hello, everyone, and welcome. The FIFA football agent regulations have had a huge impact on the ways agents operate. At first, they were fully implemented in October 2023, then subject to challenges from various countries. And lastly, they were partially suspended on January 1st, 2024. But where are we now and what will happen next? Over the next hour, we'll learn much more about this, and I'm delighted to welcome two experts who will share their industry knowledge and answer all your questions. And for our audience, please put all your questions into the live chat at any point in time. Firstly, we have the expert on FIFA agent regulations and the FIFA agent exam, Dr. Serhat Yilmaz. He's a sport law specialist and the academic director for sport agent education at Loughborough University in partnership with the Johan Cruyff Institute. Secondly, we have a top agent joining us with industry expertise and experience operating within the regulations. Pierre Delcher, managing partner at Kemari in France and trusted agent on TransferRoom, representing top French talent such as Thomas Lemar, Jeremy Le Duron, and Brahim Traoré. Welcome to both of you, Serhat and Pierre. I'm excited to share that this is just the first of a series of webinars on TransferRoom's new agent exchange. It's an unmissable thought leadership series, so you can stay ahead of the competition and tap into an expert network across FIFA regulations, transfer trends, and market opportunities. If you visit transferroom.com/agent exchange, you can find out more and you can register for our next webinar, which takes place on May 15th, and it's how to pass the FIFA agent exam. But now to today's main event. We'll get Pierre's thoughts shortly, but for the next 15 minutes, Serhat will share everything you need to know about what's happening with the FIFA agent regulations and what lies ahead. So welcome, and over to you, Serhat.
Thank you, Frederick. Thanks for the invite. So basically, just set the scene for those joining today. What I would like to do, I'll spend a bit of time just really to set the scene for us and create the context as to where we are in terms of FIFA football agent regulations, and also some of my thoughts around what lies ahead in the future. And then we can start taking your questions and also engage in dialogue with Pierre. Where we are, probably many of you have been following. So currently we have got this global partial suspension of the FFAR. As you know, the basically history of the new regulatory framework from FIFA, which was introduced back in October 2023. But what we know also that, as you know, the regulatory reform process that led to these regulations started back in April 2018. And in that process, obviously FIFA proposed some of the regulatory measures which then effectively become enforceable as of 1st of October 2023, was quite contentious, particularly those provisions concerning the restrictions on the agent's earning, so service fee cap provisions, and also some of the restrictions concerning representation arrangements or conflict of interest situations, particularly restrictions on dual representation as well as multiple representation. Since then, as soon as these regulations were some of these contentious provisions were proposed by FIFA, we know that there were a number of legal challenges globally, really. But the big one was with a success in Germany, which that decision from German Regional Court in Dortmund came out sometimes in May 2023, which meant that there was an injunction from the court, and that injunction basically required FIFA to stop implementing some of the provisions of the FFAR, hence the global partial suspension, because of the potential anti-competitive nature of those provisions under EU law, and therefore the case was referred to European Court of Justice or Court of Justice for European Union for a decision, and that is currently pending. And then we have got the big case here in the UK before the FA tribunal, which was again with some of the big agencies here in England. The agents won that case, And meanwhile, we also had a case at CAS, which was won by FIFA. But because of particularly the German case, what consequently happened was on the 30th of December 2023, FIFA actually issued this FIFA circular, which basically outlined the global partial suspension of the FFAR. Basically, these are just some of the screenshots from the circular. As you can see, there is a decision for this global partial suspension. And whilst obviously the decision from the European Court is pending, and within this circular, the FIFA outline number of provisions that are currently suspended. And I think when we think about FFAR, to appreciate the extent of this global partial suspension, it's important to perhaps look at what FFAR, particularly the provisions of the FFAR, and try to locate these suspended provisions within. So therefore, if we move to the next slide, when we apply this circular to FFAR, and I have the table of contents here, actually, as you can see, the suspension is quite substantial in terms of the provisions, particularly those provisions concerning service fee cap, representation arrangements, and disclosure, dispute, and disciplinary matters. They are all suspended. And if we think about and consider that the final provisions of the FFAR really concern the transition period from the intermediate regulations to the implementation of the FFAR, therefore, actually the impact is quite significant, and majority of the FFAR is currently suspended. So therefore, when we consider really what is left from FFAR or what is currently in force, first of all is the licensing regime. That's currently in force, and basically what it implies that anybody wants to become a football agent still need to obtain the FIFA football agent license. And also, in order to do that, they need to pass the FIFA exam. And then once, obviously, the individual become license holder, they are subject to these ongoing compliance requirements of their license. And then the other one is at the moment is not affected by the global suspension is the representation of minors regime, I call it. So this Article 13, which governs the representation of minors by football agents. What we know there is this authorization framework that FIFA has introduced, where every licensed football agents now need to first of all complete a FIFA CPD in order to become authorized to represent minors. And then obviously there are a number of restrictions around representing minors. Basically, this is currently what is left from FFAR while the global partial suspension is in place. So next slide, please. Therefore, right now, we are in this phase that we need to wait and see, particularly the outcome of the European case. It's quite fundamental. According to EU law experts and FIFA also, they anticipate that that decision from the court is expected sometimes in quartile 1 of the 2025. Therefore, for 2024, we have got effectively this global suspension phase that we need to go through. What lies ahead, though? I mean, and this is the main sort of focus of today's webinar. And for me, I think where the future is gonna go, there will be two developments. And this is just sort of my projection. And I think it's particularly the regulatory outlook and impact of this global suspension and the legal challenges is on the implementation of the FFAR is clearly, to me, illustrating that. First of all, we are gonna likely to have a fragmented regulatory outlook. And then the other thing to pay attention to, which we are gonna discuss with Pierre, is what I define as this duality in national systems. So in terms of fragmented regulatory outlook, So what this means, first of all, what we need to appreciate that national associations, particularly member associations at their domestic territory, they will be subject to those court decisions that currently coming from the legal challenges by agents. And that meant that whilst when they are complying with those decisions, their regulations inevitably need to reflect the decision of the court or comply with that court. Therefore, once there is a national case and that case is won by agents, what that means then in turn, that specific member association won't be able to really fully implement FFAR. And this is what's happening now. And therefore, to me, it will be inevitable that national football agent regulations will be diverged from the FFAR. And we already see this, for instance, in England. So, for instance, what we have got currently in England, English FA has introduced the football agent regulations, national football agent regulations. And what we are seeing there, one is, okay, the FA is recognizing the FIFA license, but also English FA retained the registration requirement for the football agents. So that means now, therefore, those who want to operate in England, particularly with respect to national transactions, alongside FIFA license, those individuals also required to register with the English FA. And alongside that, as you can see here, English FA national football agent regulations are completely silent to, for instance, any form of restriction on the service fee for agents because of the decision of the FA Football Tribunal. So therefore, I think in the future, we are going to see more and more this type of fragmented regulations at national space, which won't always align with the FFAR. The other one is the duality in national systems, as I said. So I think we have got that trend. For instance, historically, for a long time, the French system was one of the primary example of this duality, where basically there were a national law, legislation, requiring French agents to have a license, and that system operated alongside the French FA's internal regulations. Then Italy introduced similar system. So in Italy, there is a legislation as well as the regulations of the Italian FA. And now we might have also potentially similar system in English football, because what is coming in English football is this independent football regulator, which is basically established through a legislation. And then alongside that, we will have the FA, which has got the national football agent regulations in place. Therefore, I am suspecting that more nations effectively might pass legislation to create dual systems. And this is where I would like to stop.
Thank you very much, Serhat, for these fascinating insights. No doubt really important and valuable information, and also a little bit of a vision into the future for the regulations and what it means for agents. We've received many questions from the audience in the last 15 minutes, and we'll shortly put these forward to both Serhat and Pierre. But first, Pierre, I'd like to go to you. Could you explain how the combination of FIFA and the national licensing system works for you in France, and how it impacts your work, tied to the last point Serhat was making?
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. As Serhat has highlighted, in France, we had and still have a very specific system in place. We have to take an exam with the French government first, which is common to all sports, football, but also rugby, basketball, etc. Once you've had and passed this exam, then you have to take another exam with the French Federation and the FIFA regulations as well in another exam. So it's very specific, it's very long. You have to study, of course, the French Football Federation's text, but also the FIFA regulations, but also the French legal system, labor the labor regulations, the tax system, etc. So it's a very long process and quite heavy. So that's the first thing, and so that's a specificity of the French market, if I may say. What was your question? Sorry, Frederick, again.
No, I think you answered it broadly. The question was more on, or as you were alluding to, the combination of FIFA and the national licensing system that you have in France, how that works for you and how it basically impacts your work.
Yes. So yeah, and on top of that, we have to do every year a report to the French Federation with all the money transfers we had and all the deals we've done in France and abroad. So it's very long and time consuming, but we have to do it every year. Otherwise, we're not allowed to practice in France anymore. So that allowed me to get the FIFA license without taking the exam, of course. And I think it was a good idea to try to standardize at the beginning, maybe the whole thing, because as a French agent, when I want to do a deal in Belgium, I had to register in Belgium and to pay for registration in Belgium. Same thing in Portugal, same thing in Spain, in Italy. I mean, it's a long process every time, so it's very time consuming. It's a lot of money to invest as well. So the idea to have to standardize everything, to do deals was a good idea, but of course, everything behind it was not really good, as Serhat explained.
No, very true. And if we then look a bit more at the FIFA system, because you were alluding to it now yourself, what are the biggest challenges for you with the FIFA system, and how do you think the regulations for agents can be improved to make it a fair system that's, at the end of the day, easier to operate within and understand?
Okay. Well, from a national perspective, the main issue for us was the fact that players and clubs could pay the agents. So the dual representation was authorized by FIFA, but in France it's forbidden. So at the end of the day, we would have been able to be paid only by the player or by the club, which would have meant a commission of 3% only at the end of the day for us, because we could not have been paid by the club and the player. So of course, for us, it would have been a massive loss to be able to get only 3% out of a deal. So that was the first thing. And I think from a global perspective, not only from a national perspective, the main issue was, I think the cap put on the commissions, which wasn't fair and against all principles of our modern economy, I think. And especially because they said the regulations were also to try to prevent agents to be, in a position to move players too often. But at the end of the day, they reduced the commission on salaries, but they kept the commissions on transfer fees at 10%, which was a nonsense, because this would encourage even more agents to move players and get paid out of deals and transfer fees at 10%, rather than extending a contract, for example, and get only 3 to 6% of commission. So I think that was a big issue as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, so certainly not without challenges. And any other suggestions for how FIFA could improve it to make it a more fair system? There was the point on commission, but anything else that would make it easier for you to operate within and basically make it easier for agents to understand it?
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna make friends when I'm gonna say that, but I think it should be not that easy to get the license. I remember that the first few months when they implemented the FIFA license system, it was so easy to get it. A 12 years old child could have got the license, which to me was a real joke, especially when I see everything I had to do to get my license. But in general, I think it was too easy, and too many people were trying to get involved in deals, and became a jungle, to be honest. That was the first thing. I think it should be more difficult to get the license. And also, the idea to have more transparency, to have a chamber collect the commissions and then pay the agents was to me a good idea, because it would give more transparency to the system, which is not always easy to do and to get. So to me, that was a good idea, and it should be, it should be something to be kept.
Well, thanks a lot, Pierre, for sharing your first-hand experience here of operating within this complex network of FIFA regulations as well as the national system in France. Very insightful, and I'm sure everyone joining us here found that useful, and some can probably even relate to that as well. We'll now go to the open Q&A, and we'll work through the audience's questions shortly. But Pierre, do you have a question or two that you'd like to put to Serhat first before we open up the floor?
Yeah, sure. The first question I had was about the appeal that FIFA is currently has done, and there is also, of course, a big decision expected from the European Court of Justice. Do we have an idea on when that's gonna happen?
According to FIFA, so just by the way, by way of update, so the FIFA actually appealed against the injunction in Germany, and that appeal was lost as well. There was a recent decision on that, I think towards the end of March 2024. Okay. So therefore, the injunction remains in force. So FIFA obviously went to the local court and challenged the decision of the injunction, first of all. And as I said, there was a decision from the German court, and that's currently rejected. So FIFA lost that challenge as well. So now, therefore, everything really for the national court now, because the case is now referred to European court. Currently, we need to wait for that decision from the European court, and that is, I mean, yeah, the process is not quick there, but according to FIFA, some of the experts reporting this, it's likely that the decision will be sometimes in first 3 months of the 2025.
And is decision subject to appeal as well from the FIFA?
Well,
the future decision from the European.
So once the European court makes a decision, and that case is gonna look at the legality or compatibility of the regulations with the EU law. So the court will make that decision and then refer the case back to the German court for a final decision. Okay. So the case will go back to the local court. And in that process, I anticipate that there might be a further right to appear in the German national legal system.
Okay. Okay.
So
because
I'm not the expert on the German system, but we know that from the general operation of the ordinary law, usually there are those rights to appeal within the national legal frameworks.
Okay, because that leads to my second and last question, because from a legal perspective, and FIFA is basically, I'm going to smile when I'm going to say that, a non-profit organization, a non-profit association. But from a legal perspective, as actually in a position to make appeals, to impose such changes to every football association in the world, because in my mind it's very unclear how basically an association can be so powerful towards other countries and associations.
And I think you make a fundamental point there, Pierre, because when we think about these legal challenges and the way these challenges will lead to fragmented outcomes, regulatory outcomes, eventually it might. The reason I say this, because as you said, what the governing bodies of football are private entities, so they don't sit above the ordinary law. That's why when national court, local court, public court in that respect makes a decision, they need to comply with that decision. Okay, hence, therefore, to me is where the challenge lies. Okay, for someone like FIFA as a private body, as you are saying, a private actor. Okay, global regulator for football, but then it's still private body subject to ordinary law. And therefore, and same for the member association. So therefore, once there are such decisions that we are seeing now, then particularly member associations in their national context, they must comply with those decisions. So therefore it's a challenging landscape for the governing bodies at the moment.
Very. Thank you, Serhat.
And thank you, Pierre, for the questions. We'll now spend the next 30 minutes or so working through the audience's questions that have all been shared in the chat. And thank you very much, all of you, for your input. Start off first. Chris McLean has a question here to you, Serhat. Why do you think it took FIFA until the 1st of January 2024 to partially suspend these provisions when the German injunction was actually in May 2023?
Really, really good question. And I have no answer for that, unfortunately, Chris. Because yeah, really, I don't know. Yeah, the decision was earlier, but it took FIFA a while to and then what we know, yeah, to come up with that circular to comply with the injunction, as well as the sort of introduce the global partial suspension of the FFAR. But in the process, I'm wondering whether there were further catalysts, such as, for instance, English case, which was won, I think, sometimes in November, isn't it, 2023, when the decision came after the hearings. In October 2023, we had the Spanish case, which is also now refer the case to the European Court as well. So there were, number of cases there, but I don't have a really a legal answer for you, Chris. Yeah, we might need to check that with FIFA.
Okay, duly noted. Another question for you here, Serhat. So, how is it that FIFA can restrict transfer for licensed agents only? From my view, it seems clubs can still work with non-licensed agents.
Yeah, and it's a major problem, right? And we need to go back to this fundamental concept again. These entities, governing bodies, are private actors, okay? And they are trying to regulate an economic activity by individuals. And if we think about the fundamental principles of sport governance, in order for these private actors to exercise any authority on individuals, they need to have some form of jurisdictional link with the individual so that they can exercise their authority over them. And that's what the licensing system or registration system do, essentially. So it creates that jurisdictional link. And once individual has got a FIFA license, and in the process, they adhere to comply with FIFA rules and regulations. So therefore, if someone doesn't have the license or operating unlicensed, that means now it is extremely difficult for governing bodies actually to sanction or enforce their regulations upon those individuals. So that's a fundamental problem because of the way sport is governed. Now, can they ever tackle that? Obviously, the other side of the coin, in a way, that who uses those unlicensed agents? So generally, there should be players or clubs who engage with those unlicensed individuals. In this case, again, they are also subject to regulatory authority of the governing bodies. So I anticipate that, therefore, member associations and FIFA may need to take action against players and clubs who are using these non-licensed individuals. That's the basically only option to FIFA. But it's an extremely challenging area basically for governing bodies, for those individuals who are not formally licensed and being able to operate in the market or in the industry.
Challenging indeed, and not one with an easy solution. Thanks so much, Serhat. We've also had a question from Stefan about whether the suspended part of the FFAR will be part of the questions for the upcoming FIFA exam. So this question has actually already been answered in the chat, and it's linked to the next webinar we'll have next week on how to pass the FIFA agent exam. So no need to answer that directly here. We have another question from Carlos to you, Serhat. The question is, there has been spoken a lot about agents, but not about agencies. How does the changes with FFAR and the partial suspensions affect agencies as a whole?
Okay, yeah, good question. Well, one thing to note, first of all, in the previous intermediary system, as you may know, not just natural persons, not just individuals as natural persons, but also legal entities, i.e. agencies themselves, were allowed to register as an intermediary. So under the FFAR now, the licensing is only open to natural persons, so individuals. But then, obviously, what we know that majority of the agents out there, they operate in a structure, usually through a company. So therefore, effectively, agent, the agencies, the companies become part of the or the operators of the industry as well. But the key thing here is, therefore, that individual, the company needs to have an individual who is licensed to conduct football agent services. So this is quite important, and to note, first of all. And then the other dimension of perhaps of that issue to focus on is now, and I've been privy to some of these discussions in the industry where basically, particularly, there was discussion about those large agencies where they are able to, they've got a large client base. For instance, they could operate under those restrictions concerning their service fees, or if basically any of the, for some reasons, particularly during the exam phase last year, where there were a lot of questions about what if those agents who are not able to pass the exam and they cannot get their license through the legacy route, so they weren't licensed agents pre-2015, meant that if they fail the exam, what happens to their business, basically? And obviously, with big agencies where they've got a roster of agents operating under the agency umbrella, they were able to sort of work arrangements in order to basically make sure someone has got a license, whether through legacy route or through passing the agent exam, in order to maintain the client base. But whereas smaller agents, for instance, for smaller agents, not passing the exam might have mean that they would lose the business. So that was a challenge as well. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. So yes, there are therefore implications for the agencies as well, and particularly larger agencies seems to have a perhaps competitive edge in the market. But effectively now, they need to have individuals who are licensed to conduct agent services too.
All clear. Thank you very much. The next question from Machit goes, can you simplify whether licensed agents by FIFA must obey national rules at this time? And where can I find exactly what I can do as an agent and clearly what I cannot do?
Well, yeah, very good question, right? I mean, first of all, at the moment, well, that's perhaps for the academia, but we need to really research the regulatory frameworks out there. I mean, we need to understand how each national space or member associations are regulating particularly the national transactions. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have such research. And obviously, because the FFAR just came into force. I mean, historically, we had, for instance, publications on the intermediary system, where there were comparative analysis of different countries and the way it's implemented. So there were such publications and outputs available. But at the moment, I think that's to me a main challenge that we need to address for the industry, so that we've got outputs, guidelines for those, because what we know is now it's a transnational activity, isn't it? So as Pierre was outlining, agents are not just operating in one market, in one country. They work globally. So therefore, we need such understanding, how agents are regulated in different countries. I think the first part of the question was whether nationally licensed agents needs to comply with the FFAR, right?
Exactly. So whether licensed agents by FIFA must obey the national rules at this point in time.
Yeah, well, that's the for instance French system, isn't it? That's duality, right? I mean, exactly. Now we are seeing that with the English system. English FA recognizes the FIFA agent license, but still requires individuals to register with the English FA in order to provide services for national transactions. Okay, so I think what is important to note here and FFAR makes that distinction quite clearly. FIFA agent license is particularly important and required for those transactions with international dimension, but then transactions with national dimension is governed through the national football agent regulations. Or what we are seeing in France, for instance, is there is this national licensing system as well. So therefore, those countries where there is such duality, it's very important that every agent with FIFA license, they also comply with the national licensing or national regulatory framework. I suppose, Pierre, if you want to expand on this as to the French system, for instance, how can a FIFA license agent from, let's say, Portugal can actually deliver or carry out football agent services in France? What are the requirements they need to follow with respect to the national system?
I would say the basic answer would be no. If an intermediary wants to make a deal in France with a FIFA license only, it's not possible. Unless, if it's a new FIFA license, for sure it's no. The only way to make a deal in France at the moment is having a French license, of course, or being a licensed agent from the previous system. That means before 2015. So if, for example, you were a licensed agent from Portugal, as you were saying, you can still apply for an authorization to work as an intermediary in France. That would be granted to you, and you could work within the French with the French clubs. It's actually the same for me. I have my license in France since 2012. So every year I apply with the Italian Federation for an authorization to work in Italy and do deals in Italy, but also get paid, because if I'm not registered as an Italian agent throughout my French license, I can't get paid by the clubs, I can't renew contracts of my players, and I can't make new deals. So if this Portuguese intermediary only has a new FIFA license, is the only way for him to make a deal in France is to have an agreement with the French agent and do the deal with the French agent.
So therefore,
the
national system, through basically restricting the football agent services in national transaction purely for those who are licensed through the French system, creates therefore a condition for those external to the national space actually to work with the local agent or national French agent. Okay.
Serhat, we'll give your voice a slight break again, and then there's a question for you here, Pierre. So Pierre, in the case, and it's a little bit aligned in line with what we just talked about now, but in the case where you have a non-EU foreign player in your agency, let's say, for example, a Brazilian player, and you would like to transfer to a club in France, what kind of mandate or representation agreement are you using to comply with the FFF and FIFA regulations, and thereby avoid any non-conformity of your document?
Okay, so as I was explaining just before, if this Brazilian agent or intermediary has a license from the previous system, that means before 2015, he can act directly with the French clubs and do the deal on his own. He just need to request before the transfer window open an authorization to work in France, and that would be granted to him, and he can act directly and structure the deal directly with the French clubs. If, like I said, it's not an agent or an intermediary that has an old license, it's a new FIFA agent, then he has, for example, to sign an agreement with me to represent his player in France. I'll do the deal and we will share the revenues together, but he won't be able to act on his own. And that's the same in Italy, actually. If I can add, it's exactly the same system in Italy. You have to get an authorization from the Olympic Committee. It's called CONI in Italy. And then you have to get another authorization from the FIGC, the Football Association. And it costs you twice 500 euros every year.
You don't want to have too many of them.
No, I mean, also the main, I think for agents who are listening, the main challenge as well is to know in advance where you're going to make deals, because for example, between 2015 and the FFAR, like I said, you were in a position where you needed to be registered in every country. So for example, at the moment we have players in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, etc. You were in Belgium as well, where you have two entities to register to in Belgium. So, it's a lot of anticipation before the transfer window to be sure that, from one day to another, a deal can happen. And if you are not authorized or registered to work with this football association, then you have to go through a local agent that So it's a big challenge.
Did you have a comment to that, or should I move on to the next question?
But that's I think, yeah, the fundamental thing to note there is that's what the intermediary system caused. didn't it, Pierre? Because what the intermediary system did, FIFA did, it delegated the regulatory responsibility to national associations. Because intermediary regulations of FIFA just said these are minimum requirements for member associations to follow once they are implementing their own national intermediary regulations. And hence, you know, those outputs who analyze different countries, how they have implemented the intermediary system, show that every member association, some of them significantly different, some of them slightly different, actually diverge from those minimum requirements of FIFA under the FIFA intermediate regulations. And consequently, this is where we got to at the end, where literally the agents needed to work with member association and comply with those regulations in order to actually to be able to conduct agent activities in that specific territory. And as you can see, it's a major obstacle for the industry, because it's a global industry.
We have time for a few more questions, and the first one coming to you here, Serhat. So it's about clarifying the ongoing rules concerning agents receiving fees from clubs in relation to player transfers. So the example is, if an agent's player moves to another club, are agents entitled to the transfer commission from the clubs, or is it strictly when they are only representing the selling club? The person asking says that they've heard conflicting information from multiple agents.
Okay, so what we need to clarify first of all, those provisions of FFAR which introduced client pay rules, because this was the other key provision now currently suspended. FIFA wanted clients to pay rather than clients of the agent to pay the service fee rather than, and in general, it's in the case of player representation, isn't it? The club's paying on behalf of the player. But that provision is currently suspended. So that's one thing to note. Therefore, probably in practice, still some of the old practices where such rule wasn't in place and where, for instance, dual representation became almost a norm in the industry before the FFAR. So probably some of those practices are still ongoing. Secondly, obviously, with the client pay rules, FIFA also introduced those restrictions concerning dual representation and prohibition on multiple representation. So therefore, then, again, that provision is suspended. But in the case of, as Pierre was alluding, in the case of dual representation, it was only permitted dual representation under the FFAR when agent works with a player or the individual and the engaging club. And in the case of releasing entity or selling club, actually agent can only represent the selling club in the transaction. So there is no any other representation arrangements that allows other parties of the transaction to be represented alongside the selling club. And therefore then, and then what we know from the service fee cap provisions, that obviously the percentage of the cap, it changes subject to the depend on the type of the client that football agent is representing. So therefore, for me, so those might have experienced some of these practices still ongoing in the industry, but that's what FFAR is trying to do, restrict those type of situations. But as I said, currently, because these provisions are suspended, so therefore they are not enforced.
Okay, I think we have time to answer just one last question here, Serhat. And we've grouped it in two because they're a little bit similar here, but we can maybe do a summary answer on both of them. But Craig is asking, just to confirm, is the legal ruling in England final? That's his understanding. And then Martin is asking, when can a final decision about the partially suspended regulations be expected? So maybe you can do a summary answer on both of these.
No, English case is final. There's no right to appeal there. And therefore, hence, we have got, as of 1st of January 2024, the new FA national agent regulations, which are in place. So that's case is done. And then, as I said, with respect to the big pending decision from EU, that would be on the first quartile of 2025, then the case will be referred back to the national court for a decision. And therefore we can anticipate a decision sometimes in 2025 for this ongoing legal challenge. So we still have to go through 2024 under these circumstances, it seems.
Sure. We have to live with that a little bit longer. Just to say, I know we've received a lot of other questions in the chat that we didn't have time to cover yet. Thank you very much for submitting all the questions there. We'll do our best to get expert answers from Serhat and others that will then be covered in the TransferRoom Agent Exchange another time. Unfortunately, this is all we had time for today. I'd like to say a big thank you to Serhat and Pierre for their expert insights, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
And sorry. And also a huge thank you to you, our audience, for watching and for joining the conversation with so many questions. You'll soon be able to watch the full video on our YouTube channel at TransferRoom. So subscribe so you're the first one to watch the whole webinar and see all our latest video content there. As mentioned in the beginning, this is just the first of a series of thought leadership webinars on TransferRoom's new agent exchange over the coming weeks and months. You can visit transferroom.com/agent exchange for more information and see all the details of how to register for our webinars on the FIFA Agent Exam, the head coach recruitment, and how to win in the summer transfer window. Next up, Serhat will be sharing his wisdom again already next week, so we'll hear about soon on May 15th on how to pass the FIFA Agent Exam, which is a very tangible and relevant and practical applicable session. So please follow this popular webinar there, and he'll have all the very latest top tips and crucial information on how FIFA and the agent regulation changes the impact and the exam content. Finally, if you want to take your transfer business to the next level by connecting with decision makers at over 750 clubs worldwide, get access to direct, reliable, real-time market intelligence, then please tune into our website and you can hear more there. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you for your time. Goodbye.